This was a story I grew up hearing from my mom, and I was really young when this happened, and I know for a fact it was before I was 5. I only have some foggy memory of the event, especially since my mom at the time didn't want to freak me out. Here's some context first. We have family all over the country. I remember spending so much of my childhood just on road trips from state to state to visit them. So we knew our ins and outs on traveling. When I was a child, I would randomly hug strangers and tell them I loved them. I was so filled with joy and love that it spilled over onto other people. There's basically only one stranger I never immediately latched onto the second I saw them, and this is that story. So my mom was taking me to visit some relatives while my dad was staying home with my brothers. She had to go house sit, and in general is a better caretaker of me than my father, so it just made sense that I went with her. We were driving for hours until finally we hit a rest stop and got out to use it. Now there was already this guy in the parking lot, and according to my mom, it looked like he was watching everyone who was entering and leaving. The second we got out of the car, he did too. My mom held my hand as we entered the restroom, but immediately picked up on the fact that I let go of her hand to hold on to her other hand, the side of her away from that man. Looking back, she told me that it was clear, somewhere in my tiny child brain, I picked up on some sign of danger, because I avoided the man as much as I could, and would quicken my pace to the restroom and car. I never did that with any other stranger ever again. I had never blatantly avoided another adult like that. Anyways, we were doing our business and heading back to the car, and the man had gone back to his car and was watching us leave, only to then follow us in his own car. My mom immediately realized what was going on and tried to shake him off the highway. He wouldn't budge and tried to get as close as he could. Apparently, while doing this, a semi-truck driver noticed how frantic and off she was driving and could see her looking back at the car. He realized what was going on and drove up to her on her side, made eye contact with her, and then they were on the same page from then on out. Turns out the driver called up on his radio to other truckers and told them what was going on. Then a bunch of drivers from different routes nearby came onto the same highway we were all traveling on. A few minutes later, they all began blocking out the guy's car and essentially trapping him away from my mother. She turned onto the exit to get off the highway to another rest stop, as originally the truck driver followed us in. He got out and talked to my mom and told her he picked up on what was happening, asked us if we were okay, and drove with us to a Burger King and got us something to eat. We talked, and he followed us back onto the road until eventually we went our separate ways. So to the guy who was probably trying to kidnap me and my mom, let's not meet again. And to the truck driver who definitely saved our lives, thank you. When I was about 15 to 16, I was a real party animal. Always the next time over at my friends' places. Most of the time, I was able to stay at their place overnight and head home the next day. There were a few occasions where I found myself walking home. This walk was roughly 2 to 3 hours. If it was a nice night, I really didn't mind at all. It gave me the chance to sober up before I got back to my house. No, my parents didn't know I was doing this. It was just me being a stupid teenager. At the time, there was a good 40-minute stretch that was pitch black, with nothing but fields and forest on either side of the road. Every now and again, a car would pull over asking if I needed a ride home. Most times I would say no thank you and go on my way with no issue. 2 times cabs had offered me a ride home, for discounted prices, and they both seemed like amazing people. Told me about their wives and kids and how I should be really careful walking alone at night. Dropped me off at my house, made sure I got in, before driving away. One night walking home on that stretched dark road, minding my own business, a car pulled over in front of me. Not a big deal, this had happened before. As I was about to walk past, the passenger side window rolled down. Guy in his mid-30s asked if I was alright. He was very clean, handsome, and his car looked brand new. He had a smile on his face and a weirdly friendly tone. Every hair on my body stood up. Seemingly normal guy was giving me the worst gut feelings I've ever gotten in my entire life. I backed up from the car as he spoke to me. Being polite, I told him I was alright and not too far away from home. Thanked him for his concern though. The smile never left his face, but it was just wrong. Like it was being forced. He insisted that he could drive me home and then said, "There are some scary people in this world," and then laughed. By this point, my body is screaming that I need to get away from this person. I faked a smile, thanking him again, saying goodnight and goodbye. I started walking away, pulling out my phone, and pretended to call a friend. He sat in that spot for a little while before slowly creeping up beside me again, still giving me that weird smile. "Are you sure I can drive you home?" I lied and said I'm talking to one of my friends and that he was on his way. Still keeping my distance from that car. "You can wait in the car with me," he said with a bit of an odd tone in his voice. Yet again, I declined his offer. My skin was crawling, and I'm sure you could hear the nerves in my voice. I continued with my fake call, saying loudly, "Oh, you're a few minutes away? Great, you'll see me." Driver's face went completely blank. Smile gone, and not a single emotion in sight. He just looked forward, rolled up his window, and started driving away. I waited till he was out of sight before running as far away from that road as I could. I made it home safe that night, although the rest of the walk I was completely on edge. Constantly looking over my shoulder, holding my phone up to my ear like I was talking to someone. Obviously, I can't ever really know what his intentions were, but if my gut was anything to go off of, I truly feel like if I got in that car, I would never, ever have gotten home again. Trust your gut. Stay safe out there. And please don't get into cars with strangers. This happened to me around 11 years ago when I was walking home from a friend's house at night. I used to live in a rural part of the UK, and have lived in many rural areas most of my life, so I was used to these long walks, occasionally at night, especially before I could drive. They never really bothered me too much. I'd get creeped out occasionally, but this one night was absolutely the most terrifying experience I've ever had. My friend lived roughly 3 miles away from my house. He had cool parents, and my other friends and I would often go over to his house, play video games, and just hang out. Occasionally, this meant walking home at night if I stayed too late. There were 2 ways back from his house. On the road, which is about 5 miles long and took about 30 to 45 minutes. The roads were very quiet and eerie sometimes. They were lit by street lamps, so it never really bothered me walking this way. The other way was a shortcut through some woods, which took off about 2 miles, and the wooded bit was about a mile or so long. I often favored the wood shortcut. I have probably walked it over 100 times. The woods were dark this night, however, combined with the lack of ambient light due to living in a rural area. It was just an absolute abysmal dark. Luckily, most of the time I had my phone light to walk with. Sometimes my phone would die or the battery would be so low that the flash wouldn't work, so I would have to use my screen light. As you've probably guessed by now, this was one of those occasions. I remember my friends and I had just finished watching a film. It was nearing 10 p.m., so we all left my friend's house and headed our separate ways home. I contemplated briefly which way I should go. Then I decided to take the shortcut through the woods, per usual. I started walking away from his house, and towards the path that headed into the woods. Streetlights dimmed as I entered the fields before the woods. I glanced at my phone and saw my battery was extremely low. Only enough power left for a couple of minutes of flash, and then I'd have to use my screen. That wouldn't last the whole way either. As I saw the tree line approaching, I switched on the flash and followed the well-trodden path into the darkness. To my dismay, my light died within seconds of entering it. I flipped my phone over to try and shine the way using the screen. As I walked, I looked out for all the familiar landmarks I was used to seeing, to at least ensure that I was heading in the right direction. Funky tree stump, check. Half-fallen fir tree, check. Enormous puddle I need to jump over, check. All was going well. I was halfway through the woods when my phone completely died. I remember the moment it happened, and I was completely engulfed in darkness. I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this level of darkness before, but it was so dark I couldn't even see the outline of my hand centimeters in front of my face. Naturally, my pace slowed considerably, and I started holding my hand out in front of me to make sure I was going to walk into a tree or something. I continued walking for a minute or so, until all of a sudden a pungent smell hit me. Cigarette smoke. I glanced around but didn't see anything. Then I heard it. A cough. I wasn't alone. Thoughts raced through my head. Who would be out in the woods in the middle of the night? In the middle of the dark like this? Following me? Am I lost? I quickened my pace again, throwing a little caution to the wind. I carried on walking and tripped slightly on a branch. As I regained my balance, I heard another sound. Branches breaking underfoot. It sounded like it was something right behind me. Snapping turned into fast footsteps and grew louder and louder. I started sprinting. I felt the well-trodden path turn to brush. I felt branches, logs, and plants hitting my legs. And it wasn't long before I fell, hard. I was lying on the floor, holding my knee. I could still hear branches snapping around me and a voice muttering something. I didn't dare move. And all of a sudden, they turned on a torch. I couldn't see anything except for a beam of light, which seemed to be eaten quickly by the darkness of the forest. I lie motionless on the ground as the beam swept through the trees. I could still hear the person mumbling, a deep growl. Crunching of footfalls grew and grew. They were only several feet from me by this point. I couldn't breathe. Light went out, snapping of branches grew, and then nothing. Quiet. My eyes were wide open, but I couldn't see anything. Then, I could hear whizzing. Right above me. I wanted to cry. I wasn't sure if this person could see me or not. They could have been staring right at me and I wouldn't know. This carried on for about 5 minutes until the crunching of leaves and the snapping of twigs started up again and then got fainter and fainter as they moved away from me. I continued to lie down for another 5 or 10 minutes, contemplating my escape. Like an idiot, I'd ran off the path. I wasn't sure which way was back to it, or which way was home. Really didn't care. Thought I was going to walk in one direction until I left the woods and get home from there. I knew as soon as I start moving again, if that same person was still in the woods, they would hear me. Should I run or try to sneak out? I opted for the latter. I slowly rose to my feet, listened constantly to my surroundings, picked a direction, and started walking. I wasn't perfectly quiet, but quiet enough to be sure I wouldn't be heard from too far away. I kept hearing snapping sounds and rustling in the distance every time I froze. I'd hold my breath until I was happy no one was there, and then began walking again. I repeated this pattern for what felt like an eternity, until eventually I found the path. I screamed for joy in my mind and sped up my pace. After another 10 minutes, I saw it. Light. Streetlights flickering in the trees. I've never been so happy to see a meager street lamp. But as I progressed to the end of the woods, my heart sank. At the end of the path was a black silhouette, unmoving. Contrasted against the light background was the dark figure of a man. What should I do? Maybe it's a different person? Perhaps it's someone walking their dog. I froze, watched them silently, but did not move at all. They just stood there. They were guarding the entrance to the woods. I did not know what to do. At this point, I'd had enough. I was so close to getting out, I decided to just run straight towards the exit and straight towards them. I was a 6-foot young man, and if they wanted to stop me, they'd have a hard job of doing it. So that's exactly what I did. I started sprinting. The figure grew and grew as I reached them. I stepped to the side and I heard someone growl, "Fuck!" loudly. I felt something clip the back of my head and tug on the back of my jacket. I cleared the sheep gate in one leap and sprinted into the light. I eventually stopped running when I could see the first house and look back. The entrance to the woods was quite far away now, and I couldn't see anyone standing by the entrance. Relaxing a bit for now, I finished my walk home. That's pretty much it. I may have overreacted. It could have been someone out for a walk in the woods, or a dog walker or camper. But what I thought was strange, they didn't use their torch except briefly on one occasion. once they heard me, they also actively seeked me out. Who knows what would have happened if they caught me. In any case, I never walked that way home alone again. Context: I'm 26 and I'm a lady. I needed gas and it was around 11 p.m. on a Saturday. I pulled into a busy gas station to fill my tank, except it was completely bare. Not a car in sight. I also live in Alaska and it was very cold this night, maybe negative 10 degrees. Tired after work and just wanting to get home, my usual routine would be to start at my pump and then sit in my car due to the freezing cold. For some reason this time, I had a weird feeling that I needed to stand by the pump, so I did. I had just started pumping my gas when a little golden sedan pulled up right next to me. A guy got out, and I was feeling hyper-vigilant for some reason. He started cleaning his completely clean windows. As he put back the squeegee, he started towards me. I felt like I wanted to run, but stayed calm and continued pumping. He asked me if I would help him put the windshield wiper fluid in his car, because he ran out and he doesn't know how to open the hood. I laughed it off and told him I don't know either. He just kept getting closer and closer to me, while trying to lure me into his car by saying there's something underneath his seat that he can't reach because he's too big. I'm 5'2" and petite. This man was large and scruffy, think Alaskan wilderness dude. At this point I'm freaking out and hit the call button on the pump. He took a step back and started to go back to his car. I thought I was being smart. My gas is almost done, and I looked into his car when I noticed the inside of the doors had no handles except for the driver door, and that really freaked me out. I was putting the pump back and opening my door, and all of a sudden he was right behind me. He slammed my door, and he yelled, "Hey, you're coming with me!" Obviously, I refused, and I was petrified. He grabbed my arm and slammed me against my car. I elbowed him as hard as I could and started to scream at the top of my lungs. Thank God for that gas attendant. The big-ass gun, because if not for him, I don't know what would have happened. The attendant pulled the video and we made a police report. Immediately after that, the guy took off and I never heard anything else about it. I just hope he didn't get other girls alone like that. So the guy with no door handles, yeah, let's not meet again. For clarification, I'm a male and this happened in my early 20s. Before I start, I need to provide a little backstory. I grew up a very sheltered life, usually only leaving the house for grocery runs and doctor's appointments. I didn't even go to school. My mother decided it was best for me to homeschool. I was, and still am, very socially awkward as a result of my upbringing, though I'm getting better. One thing I did leave the house for as a child was to compete in talent competitions. I was a pianist, and still am, though a little rusty. I had a newspaper article published for me once to advertise a fundraising concert I was holding at my local church. I needed funds to go to a competition 1,500 miles away. In the article, the journalist recorded a quote from me. She had asked what I thought of my talent, and being a child in a Christian house. And I replied, "It's not my talent, God let me borrow it." Fast forward till I became an adult. I was eager to leave the house and to get out on my own. I decided to get my commercial driver's license so I could get out and see as much of the world as I could. Besides driving long hours and the occasional night of having trouble finding a halfway decent place to park at the end of the day, I enjoyed it. One night I was pulling into a truck stop to park for the night. As I was taking my dog out to do his business, I passed the truck next to mine. It had its driver's side window down, and the driver was sitting in the driver's seat. He called out to me as I passed him, complimenting that he liked my dog and asked if he was friendly. I thanked him and informed him that my dog was shy of strangers. Being that I sat in a truck all day with no human interaction, besides the occasional honk and guy flipping me off for being slow, I longed for conversation, and I told him I would be right back. A few minutes later, after putting my dog back in my truck, I walked over to talk to my parking spot neighbor. We chatted for a while, him in his chair and I standing at the top step of his truck. After about 20 minutes, he asked me if I noticed that his arm had bumped mine 7 times. This surprised me. I had not noticed it at all. Thinking back on it, I believe he was testing to see how situationally aware I was. Told him I had not noticed. It was cold outside, considering it was the middle of winter. So he invited me in to sit in his truck to continue our conversation. This is where I should have had alarm bells ringing in my head. Growing up so sheltered, I was way too trusting of people. So I entered. We continued to talk. The conversation started crossing lines, asking questions that were way too personal. He was asking me stuff like, "What's your phone number? Who are your parents? What was your grandparents' full names? Where do you live?" Regretfully, I answered him. Thankfully, I had the sense to at least not give him my actual address. We had also swapped seats during the conversation. First, he had moved to the passenger seat so I could sit in the driver's seat. But then we swapped where I was in the passenger seat and he was now in the driver's seat. The conversation started to take a weird and creepy turn. After all those questions, he asked, "Did you notice that my eyes don't have any color?" His irises were black. Just 2 black orbs surrounded by the white of his eyes. This is where I started to feel very uneasy. He started talking about my childhood. And this is where he said something that really disturbed me. He asked, "Didn't you have a talent as a kid?" I said yes, and that I played the piano. He replied, "Wouldn't that be a lie since you only borrowed it?" I had not mentioned anything to him about that article. And the city it was from was too small to be noticed by someone that lived so far away. He had claimed he lived 2,000 miles away from my hometown. I was ready to get out of there. I was trying to think of some excuse to get myself out without raising suspicion. He started trying to convince me to ride with him to his next delivery, and to just leave my truck where it was. And he would bring me back the next day. I declined. He then asked if I would come visit him at his home. Again, I declined. It had been several hours, so I decided to tell him that I needed to take my dog back out again to do his business. I exited his truck and took my dog out again, but this time, when my dog was done, I went back in my truck and locked the doors. I also tilted both seats forward so it would be difficult for him to enter my truck, buying me time if I needed it. Thankfully, the next morning he was gone. I continued on my day relieved that I was away from him. A few hours later, he called me.
"So why did you tilt your seats forward last night?"
I told him it was to keep my dog from jumping on them. He continued to talk to me. I kept my answers short this time. I blocked his number after he hung up, and later decided to change my own number. I know I was lucky that it didn't go further than that creepy conversation. I am more than careful now about who I talk to and where I am. Be careful, everyone. Never get in a stranger's vehicle. No matter how friendly and innocent they seem, I've definitely learned my lesson. So, creepy parking spot neighbor, let's not meet again. When I turned 9, my parents finally let me start walking to school. It wasn't far, and even though they were worried, I assured them I would be fine. I was so excited because my best friend lived next door, and that meant we could walk to school together and back every single day. Things were going great for the first few weeks. We had so much fun laughing and talking all the way to school and back home. There was a liquor store along the way that we would stop at on the way home to get some snacks and candies, but only on Friday. It was our little treat, and the thing we looked forward to the most at the end of the week. One Friday afternoon after school, we began our walk to the liquor store talking about school as usual. It was just like any other time we went to the store. We would rush in, laughing all the way, to the candy, pick out our favorites, and then hop in line to pay. This time, there's a man with a pack of beer, and he looked like he worked in construction or something. He was in line before us with another man, but when he saw us, he let us go first. We thought he was just being nice, so we happily obliged and talked to the cashier, and my friend stayed behind me. I could hear the two men behind us speaking in Spanish and laughing, so I turned around to look and see my friend with a nervous look on her face. She grabbed my arm hard after I paid and practically pulled me out of the store. I kept asking her, what's wrong? She said she didn't feel safe and we should just run home. I was confused and wanted us to just enjoy our candy on the way back like we always did, until she told me what she had heard. I don't speak Spanish, but she did, and apparently the two men were talking about me. She said that one of them pointed to me and said, "She looks like the one." They both laughed and agreed. Then the one with the beer said, "Let's follow him home. We can grab her around the corner. She's small. Won't put up a fight." I froze in fear. We were still in the parking lot of that store, and I did not know what to do. We looked around us and saw the two men get into a big work truck. They didn't even glance our way, so I told my friend they were probably just joking, and we were being overly paranoid. But boy, was I wrong. My friend did not agree with me and said they were definitely serious and we should start running now. I was hesitant at first, until I turned around and saw the truck was right behind us. I took one look at my friend, and we grabbed hands and ran as fast as we could. Our hearts were racing, and we didn't dare turn around. We were both crying, and I ended up dropping our bag of candy. I turned the corner, and there was the truck. My heart dropped. The man in the passenger seat hopped out and began to approach us. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were locked on me. I have never been that terrified in my life. I was frozen in fear. My friend, however, started yelling at the man in Spanish, and he seemed to get angry. There's a busy road to the left of us, and it was our only way out. We knew what we had to do without even saying. We didn't look left and didn't look right. We just ran for our lives across traffic. A car almost ended up hitting us, but they slammed on the brakes and started honking. We both just kept running and running. We were about a block from our houses when we were out of breath and hysterical. We thought we had made it back, but we heard a whistle and looked, and sure enough, it was the same truck. The men were on the other side of the street, windows down, whistling at us. We had no option but to run as fast as we could to our houses. My mom was in front, gardening, and was shocked to see us running and screaming. We couldn't quite get the words out right. All we managed to say was a truck was following us. She immediately ran to the street to see the truck peel away. As soon as she calmed us down, she called the cops to take a report, but nothing really ever came of it. And I was never allowed to walk to school again. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit that like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified of future episodes when they come out. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email, or post it to my subreddit. All these links are below. Thanks for being patient with me on this episode, guys. I know it took me a lot longer than I planned on. Just had a bunch of shit come up, and I haven't had time until tonight. And if you couldn't hear, there was insane fucking winds in the background. So if you heard the noises, that was the fucking wind. So I guess it kind of molded in with the thunderstorm ambience. But holy shit, on top of people driving by every 5 seconds and revving up their truck. It's been one non-stop noise after the other, so it's been a hell of a night trying to record this, but it's done. I hope you like it, and I hope you enjoyed this new background as well. I got this low poly guy to do the mausoleum graveyard background thing. It's really fucking awesome. 90% of you don't look at the background anyway, but for those that do, check this out. It's fucking cool. There's nice little Easter eggs and stuff in there that you can notice if you've watched it. So I don't know. I'm really stoked about it, and I love this type of shit. So I got something big coming the following week. It's gonna be something new again, something half of you are going to like and the other half you probably won't give two fucks about. But it's coming regardless, and hopefully I will have another regular episode like this out on Sunday, Monday time frame. So thanks again for all the support, all the great comments, everything you guys do. I love y'all, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.